I would just go get a motherfucking job, and work at night. Like when I got to Dallas, I had nothing, and I was sleeping on the floor, 5 roommates, got a job bartending and bar backing at night. Hated it, right? But I had to pay the bills until I got going. And so, there's nothing, making a living, just having a job, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It may not be your final ambition, but there's nothing wrong with it being your starting point. And, you got to take care of your family. And, I'm not this, I don't believe in the whole, well, just go start that business. If you really bust your ass, you can be a millionaire in 12 months, right? Using other people's money and looking for shortcuts. And, hey, I'm going to, I saw this online and I'm going to trade futures or, all this other bullshit. You can't, there's no shortcuts.
Fatherhood was never meant to be a solo mission, but somewhere along the way, we were told to figure it out alone. And today, when we do show up with strength, society calls it toxic. That ends here. Dad Tribes is where fathers rise together, where brotherhood replaces isolation, and where leadership at home creates freedom for their families. This is the Dad Tribes podcast, where we're turning fatherhood into a brotherhood. Welcome in. Our guest today needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. He's the outspoken entrepreneur, investor, and owner of the Dallas Mavericks. He's also a star on the hit TV show Shark Tank and a passionate advocate for pushing boundaries and redefining success. But what sets him apart is his dedication to his family and his relentless pursuit of a well-balanced life. Gentlemen, today we are honored to have none other than Mark Cuban joining us. In this episode, we'll delve deep into Mark's insights on how fathers can navigate the challenging waters of modern life, unlocking their full potential in health, wealth, and relationships. So grab your notepads because you're about to embark on a journey of transformation and inspiration. All right, Mark, we want to start with Robert. Robert had a question starting out with health.
Before we get to the questions, I just got to say, you're overselling me. Way overselling me.
Yeah.
I'm just another dad trying to figure it out like everybody else.
Well, that is beautiful because, I think we all have a level of understanding and not understanding what to do next with kids, right? It's just, there's a lot of things.
It's a crapshoot. Yeah. You just don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, thanks so much for being here. And, I got 2 boys, 6 and 2. So I'm right there. You got 3. That's amazing. Andrew here has 5.
Damn.
6 on the way.
Coming on 6 soon.
Damn.
Yeah. He's way outnumbered. So he's got us.
You're allowed to do something else, right? You can read a book.
They keep telling me that. I thought when they said use protection, that meant just carry firearms. I didn't realize that meant something else.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Okay. So I'm a big proponent of, we got to take care of ourselves and being healthy. It needs to be a priority. If we're not healthy, we can't take care of anybody else. So,
Right.
One of the obstacles that we hear a lot is entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are just grinding it out, trying to make it for their family, be successful. They just push off the eating healthy and then maintaining a gym membership at all, or let alone going. How have you managed that over the last decade plus on, my work life can be crazy with all the companies you're a part of, with Shark Tank and shooting and the Mavericks and traveling with family and then maintaining a healthy lifestyle.
Well, first question is, how old are you, right? I was the old dad. I had my first baby when I was 50. No, wait, how old was I? 2003, 45. I take that back. My last one was when I was 50. And so, as the old dad or older dads are getting older these days than when I was a kid. I have to work harder to stay in shape, to keep up with my son. My son's about to turn 14 and I can still beat him one-on-one. He's growing and he thinks he's going to kick my ass. And so, my priorities and my approach is going to be a little bit different than if I was 25 and had kids, right? Where it's a little easier to stay in shape and you're not so much worried about, the little things, and you can eat some junk with the kids and not have to buy a new pair of pants or new clothes to deal with your expanding waistline. So first you got to just look at who you are and where you're at and your own life, but recognize no matter how old you are, if you're not healthy, like you said, then you're not going to be there for your kids. And not only that, it just creates more stress because, all of us have been in that situation where, okay, we're not feeling as good as we'd like to feel. And that stress kind of carries over to your spouse, carries over to your kids. And so I've always tried to place a priority on being healthy. Haven't always. If you look at pictures, that's one of the bad things about being visible. You can see all the pictures of me when, I'm weighing a lot more, weighing a lot less, whatever it may be. But I try to make a priority of staying in shape. And now, as I've gotten older and my kids are teenagers, it's made all the difference because I can keep up with them and I've got the energy to deal with them. Whereas, if I just come home after a stressful day and just vegetate and sit on the couch and try to de-stress and stress eat, which I'm really good at, then it just kind of compiles and just makes everything worse.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you got to be there for your kids.
So one thing, Mark, on top of that, the other day, Robert took me and we went to this place where they do the transfusion, the IVs, the drips, right? So I did a vitamin B drip. I know, Robert, you did, what is it called? What you did with your blood?
I'm trying NAD, ozone blood infusions. I'm big into health, so I'm gonna live forever, right? I got to try everything, see how I feel.
Do you ever do any of that stuff yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I read about all of that, right? But I've tried to evolve my diet as I've gotten older to just be cleaner. I'm a vegetarian most of the time. I'm a pest, I'll eat sushi when there's nothing else, or some fish if there's nothing else to eat. But I really try to not eat processed foods, really limit my sugar, and just really have a diet that I'm not shaking my head at. Right now, that's not to say on kids' birthdays, like my daughter just had her 17th birthday, and I'm an icing fanatic. I'm going to dig in, right? I'm going to have my cheat days. But for the most part, I try to work out 5 times a week, and I try to really watch what I eat. I use a application called MyFitnessPal, and I literally log in everything that I eat every day. Not, and it's not an exact science for me, but it helps me keep track of calories and nutrition and all the things that are important. And so while I don't go out there and try all the latest stuff, like I've read up on the NAD stuff and yeah, it says it works on mice and maybe it'll work on us. And I've seen the IV stuff and, we've used it at the Mavs and it certainly does make a difference. But, unless I'm hungover, which I try not to be as much as I used to be, then I really just believe exercise and diet and drinking a lot of water are what really keeps me on track.
Yeah, probably best 3 anyways.
Well, I'll jump in with the next one. So Robert's really big on physical health. So I've been learning a lot from him on that side. And I always like going with the mental health side, right? Mm-hmm. So, because I think it's a huge part of, I'm an entrepreneur, Robert's an entrepreneur. Some of these guys are business owners, some of them aren't, but mental health across the board is always important. And I think today it's more challenging than ever before. If you look at social media, everybody's lives look amazing, right? When it's not the truth, but everything looks good on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever's next. For someone like you, you are constantly in the public eye. Like you can't go anywhere and do anything without being recognized or documented. How do you handle all that, especially with your family?
They've gotten used to it for better or worse. I've gotten used to it. I tend to go back to the same places I always go to. So people are used to me. So it's no big deal. I've been working out at the same gym for years, go to the same restaurants over and over again. So it's just like, hey, Mark, what's going on? Da, 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 da. It's not like, oh, there's Mark, that's pretty cool. And, there's still gonna be times when, people are asking me for pictures and I'm always for that. It takes 2 seconds to say yes. And hey, let's just take a selfie versus, well, I don't know, da, 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 and trying to come up with an excuse. And in terms of mental health, I just always try to find ways just to relax. I'm not a super stressed person. I'm very competitive and I don't like to lose and, I'll get amped up, but I don't get really mad. I'm not the type to get really mad and I'm not the type to be revengeful. I really, if you can get me on a basketball court and I can make, a few shots in a row and I hear the sound of the ball going through the net, I'm relaxed, right? That just keeps me away from anything else that might be bothering me. Just thinking about, okay, here, got to work on my jumper, work on my form shooting. And when that ball goes through the net, I'm happy. And then, other times just getting a regular workout in, because if you bust your ass working out, you're tired, right? And when you're tired like that, you're too tired to be stressed, right? And you're too tired to get all amped up. And that certainly has its benefits. And look, we all have little things that we go through one way or the other, whether it's health, whether it's work, whether, if you're an entrepreneur dealing with everything, every entrepreneur's had situations where things have just got messed up, right? And things didn't go according to plan. And you've got to really focus in your own mind on not letting that get the best of you. Not, if you see a negative comment, like I'm human like everybody else. I'll go online and go on social media and someone will say that Mark Cuban's fucked up, right? What an idiot, sell the Mavs and you don't know anything, and because I'm competitive, my initial instinct is to want to fight back. And, my kind of approach is to write that tweet or write that post and immediately delete it. So I get it out of my system. But everybody's just got to find that one thing that calms them down, whatever it is. And you've got to recognize and be really brutally honest with yourself when your blood pressure is going up and you're putting yourself in a position to get mad. And, it's what I say to my kids, is it worth it? Is it really, really worth it? Because what I've learned all over the years is when I get mad, I'm usually the victim at that point. I'm making myself the victim. My being mad doesn't impact anybody else. It's like, oh, Mark's mad. Okay, who cares? Even if I'm the boss, right? And, it really, being mad has never had any long-term benefits that I've ever seen. Really just letting it get the best of you has never had any benefits that I've ever seen. It just impacts your health more than anything else. And if you get mad enough, if you're one of these people that's just mad all the time, then people don't want to be around you, and it's counterproductive in terms of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
See, that's a huge part of what I, heading towards the attacks, right? The public attacks, all that stuff. That's something that happens as you build, especially to the level that you have. But a lot of these guys are building things and being prepared for those opportunities. I mean, just yesterday, I had to remove a guy from the community who was just negative. He was just bringing negative energy, just wasn't a fit. And now he's going, he goes around and says, oh, this guy's a fraud. He's a scam, things like that.
Everybody talks shit like that because they can.
Right.
Because, everybody follows a couple of rules, whether they know it or not. People take the path of least resistance. People want to feel important where they are. Mm-hmm. You want to feel important in your family and appreciated. And if you're in a community like this, you want to feel important. And there's always some level of competition, particularly when it's all guys, right? There's always some level of competition where it's like, okay, how can I stand out? And when that doesn't happen, some people go quietly into the night and, moving on, I don't care. And other people get, reactive, and they try to punk you, try to just mess with you. Just, that's what testosterone does to all of us at some level. And, when you're on when you're taking that abuse, you just got to feel sorry for the person.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't benefit him at all. There's no upside for the person that's bitching like that. None.
Yep.
None. And so on one hand, you want to respond and say, you motherfucker, this, because that's the competitive side, or that's not true. And this is why it's not true. And we've all gone down that rabbit hole at some point, but the reality is,
it's not self-serving.
It's not worth it, and they're their own worst enemies. They have to live with themselves. It's like people talk about canceling people and for whatever reason, politics, sports, whatever. I'm like, I'm not one to want to cancel people. I want to know who the idiots are. I don't want them to go away. I want to know that this person, this is how he feels about me. This is what they think about this or that. And I may agree or disagree, but now I know, as opposed to them being, in a corner somewhere and doing something crazy that I didn't see coming.
Right. So I love that, because I think that's important. So go ahead. I know Robert wants to jump in, because we were having a conversation about work-life balance. Dealing with the attacks is one thing, but then work-life balance, I mean, that's the key topic in entrepreneurship that I see all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. People talk about, the entrepreneurs working 60 hours a week and not spending time with their family because they're grinding it out, trying to get to the next level. But some people are just so driven with work wise, they forget about the family aspect of life. And, when I do coach people on the commercial side, I tell them all the time, when you're in a rut, you're getting those attackers, you need to have a pattern interrupt. Like you just kind of said, you need to have something to break it up, go do something that makes you happy, refine your center so you can come back in a different spot instead of continue down the I'm angry and it's going to come out on the phone or your conversation or with your kids. But with your world, which is a really big world, I know you have a large staff, but at some points, I'm sure it takes a ton of your time. How do you balance that? I need to make sure I was always there for my kids and my wife and my businesses. Like,
Remember I said how old I was when I first had kids. It's because I didn't balance it.
yeah,
My story, that I always tell is I dated a girl for 5 years and it was like, it's me or your business. And I was like, what's your name again? You knew what you were getting when while we were dating, you knew I was on a mission and no, I'm driven. And, but I purposely didn't get married, purposely didn't have kids at that time because I knew I would not have been capable to have that work-life balance. That's just not how I'm wired. But at the same time, once you're there, right? If you get married, you find the right person, or, you find the right partner, have kids, you are where you are. And you've got to really have a supportive spouse or partner that you can work with and be transparent with. I mean, look at professional athletes. An NBA season is 7 to 9 months, depending on the playoffs, and you're traveling all the time. Yeah. And all the athletes, all the coaches, all the staff have to have supportive spouses. Otherwise, it's a disaster, right? Because it's hard to just be going city to city to city and not seeing your family for, 3, 5, 7 days at a time and then be gone again in 3 days. And so you really have got to work with your partner and really come to understandings about how you're going to deal with these things. And the reality is you're going to miss things. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to grow a business, unless it's just going, better than you ever imagined possible, which rarely happens, you're going to miss things. And the goal is trying to figure out how to compensate for that, how to, put your kids and your partner on your schedule to make sure that you're dealing with them or communicating with them or spending time with them so that, on your Calendly, and someone's looking for time, 4 o'clock, you're going to go pick up your kids or whatever it may be. And so while you may not be able to check every box, and I've never met an entrepreneur that didn't feel a little bit guilty about not being able to do the things their partner's been able to do, or it hasn't been on the downside of, passive aggressiveness, where it's, your partner just shakes their head, or your kids just shake their heads, and that's dad, right? And that's just the way it is right now because this is what dad's trying to accomplish. So it's hard and it's painful, but that's reality. We all as entrepreneurs have the choice, literally, go get a job for 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Go get a job where you can be home. You don't leave until 8:30 in the morning. You get to work at 9, get home at 6, home for dinner every day. That is your choice. But if you choose to be an entrepreneur, you got to take the good with the bad.
Well said. Well, along with that, actually, I did have a thought, and I shared with Andrew today, and actually with someone else on the phone call. But a lot of people aren't entrepreneurs, right? They have the 9 to 5 job, and they either got married too soon, they had kids when they weren't ready. Just life happens, and with those individuals, those dads out there, or even the moms who want to stay in gratitude and be grateful for what they have, their health and where they are in life, and their kids and their spouse, but deep down they feel like they want something more. They're living in, mediocre land, and they feel like a caged lion, right? They used to be wild, and now they've been trapped in their 30 by 30 cell, and they're just basically waiting to die. Some people feel that way. What would you suggest the conversation start or the catalyst to help them move away from that, either mindset or decisions making going forward?
You've got to find something that challenges yourself. I mean, look, at some point you have to be self-aware. It's not going to be when you're 22. Yeah. It's not going to be when you're 25. It may not be when you're 30. It may be when you're 50, 60, 70, who knows, right? And you've just got to be honest with yourself about who you are. And That's not to say you can't find things that fulfill you and make you feel good about yourself. You know, people go out and play pickleball now. There's no such thing as a bad pickleball player, but there's only a few really great pickleball players, right?
Right.
And so whatever it may be reading and learning and joining a book club, or it may be, having a side hustle that makes you feel good. It may be volunteering and working for a nonprofit with your kids. There's always something that you can connect yourself to that makes you feel good, that will, be a great example for your kids, that will also make you look good to people looking at you. So, if you're the competitive type and you want, and you really are hurt by the fact that you didn't achieve, you're 40, 45 years old and you didn't achieve the things you expected of yourself. Nobody in high school thinks I'm going to be a failure, or few people think they're going to be failures. And you go to college, if you go, or you get that first job and you think to yourself, I'm going to be really good at this, or, this is not bad, I can deal with this. And then at some point it's like, oh man, what's next? Is there a what's next? And there's always something that you can feel good about. The fallback always is just volunteering. Just find a charity that you and your wife can go to together and have an impact. Because to have an impact for a nonprofit is just about showing up 90% of the time. And if you set that example for your kids, they're going to have a good heart. They're going to learn from you and you're going to feel good. And that doesn't cost you money. It doesn't cost you anything, but, not putting your fat ass on the couch one day a week, or before football games start at noon, depending on where you are in the world, you're getting your workout in and you're going to do an hour or two of volunteer work, then putting your fat ass down with a beer and watching the games. And you're looking at your kids saying, guys, we were able to help this family, or we were able to do that. Let's just relax and enjoy the moment because we had an impact. Every single human on the planet can do that. It's just a matter of choosing to do that and not feeling sorry for yourself.
I love that. That's awesome.
And on the topic of failure, because you talked about that, and I think failure is a hot topic when it comes to fatherhood, right? It's something we all fear of failure financially, fear of failure as a father. Am I making them into contributing members of society? Everything along those lines. But fear for me hits hard when it comes to business, right? I've been an entrepreneur since I got out of the military over 10 years ago. I've succeeded and I've failed many, many times. Obviously succeeded to me isn't $1 billion, but it took care of what I needed to take care of. Now, your book, How to Win at the Sport of Business, I know you talk about fear a lot in that book as well. So can you kind of hit on that for those guys that do feel at that cage line, they are stuck, they're trying to figure out their way out, but maybe it's fear of failure, or fear of putting their family or their children in a tough spot financially to take that jump and take that risk. Can you kind of talk
I'm always
on that?
terrified of failing, always. And what I've tried to always, the way I've tried to approach it is having two things in mind. One, it doesn't matter how many times you fail, you only got to be right one time, right? And then everybody thinks you're an overnight success and yada, yada, yada. And two, the more prepared I am, the less fearful I am. The more I can go in having done the work, because everybody had, in this country particularly, we're a country of entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs. It's rare that somebody has no interest in starting a business. And most people get the idea, they get all excited about it. They tell their friends, or tell their spouses or partner, and they tell their kids if they're old enough, and try to get feedback, and everybody encourages you, and then they stop. And they don't step over that little line to get started. They'll make excuses. I need to raise money or this or that. It's never about raising money. It's always about effort. And that's what it comes down to. Are you willing to put in the effort to learn? Because rare is the time when you start a business where there's no competition. There's always going to be competition. There's going to be somebody who sees you and wants to compete with you. And so if you put in the effort to prepare, it's no different than shooting a basketball. You don't just walk out and play in the NBA. You better bust your ass and practice, practice, practice. My kids are so annoyed because I have all these sayings. The one thing in life that you can control is your effort. Practice until you can't get it wrong. How you do anything is how you do everything. And those little quotes, those little silly sayings to me really define how I approach things. How I do everything, how I do anything is how I do everything. You know, if you see yourself cutting a corner on the smallest little thing, probably going to cut corners on the bigger things too. You know, if you talk about, oh yeah, I worked really hard at it, and then you realize you didn't work enough, you had control of your effort, you just didn't get it done. You know, and so there's all these ways to approach things that all of us can take that aren't about fear of failure. It's more about fear of effort or fear of not willing to do the work. You know, because if you're prepared, if you do the work, every business is competition, right? That's why I called my book The Sport of Business, How to Win the Sport of Business. It's always about competition, no matter what the business is. And the more time you put in to learn your industry and to know your company and to know your products and services and those of all your competitors, the better off you'll be. Because if you're starting a business of a community of dads, and somebody else sees it, they say, okay, I know what they're doing. I'm going to try to kick their ass. So here's what I have to do. Mm-hmm. And there's always in every business, someone trying to kick your ass, just like you're trying to kick someone's ass. And the only response is putting in the time to learn. You have got to put in the effort. You've got to learn. You can't cut corners. There's no shortcuts. I mean, you just have got to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to your industry. Otherwise, whoever's smarter is going to kick your ass. And, you know, that's a long-winded way of saying it all, but, you know, if it were easy, everybody would do it.
Right. Well, we actually have a couple of questions from the guys before we transition to wealth, a couple of questions from the guys on health. Corey Donnellan, I'm sorry if I'm screwing up your last name. Corey asked, what do you do on days you wake up unmotivated to keep pushing forward? Those days that are just hard.
I don't have those days. Okay. I don't have those days, right? There's days when I'm tired and I don't want to get out of bed, but I'm always reading something because I know that there's somebody that's laying in bed that's doing nothing, and I can give myself an edge. And I like to learn. I think one of my greatest skills is that I love to learn. I truly believe that. And, you know, when I talk to people about going to college or not, going to college is about learning to learn. Can you learn how to learn? Because in a world of constant change, you have to always be learning. And so, you know, I don't mean to sound kind of crazy when I say, well, I don't have days where I'm not motivated. It's what I really mean to say is I can always find something to create value for myself. I don't care if I keep a book I keep the books I have the hardest times reading are in my bathroom. They're on next to the throne, right? And so I can always find, you know, that's where I get my peace and quiet. And I can take 5 of those, 10 of those minutes until my leg falls asleep and read something and learn something, right? So if you're not reading on the crapper till a leg falls asleep, you're not doing it right. And that's my take-home message. But you get my point, right? There's always a way to learn something. There's always a time and place to learn something. And you don't have to spend 3 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours. If you can always spend time to learn something every day, and once you find that thing that you really like to learn, then it's fun. It's fun to learn that stuff, and that's where the motivation comes from. If you don't have something that you're driven towards, then you'll have those days where it's like, okay, shit, what am I going to do? I don't know, whatever. Where's that beer? When's football on? When's basketball on?
It's easy to fall back into laziness. That's for sure.
Sure. And look, even if the game's on, if you just got something on your phone that you're reading and learning during the commercials, just always learn. Find something you can learn. And one day something's going to click. Oh shit. Right? I like this stuff. Damn, people talk about their passions. I've never been a big believer in follow your passions. I've always been a believer that when you find yourself spending time with something, that's where you'll get passionate about those things. Follow your time. And once you start to get good at it, people don't quit things that you're good at. It's fun to be good at shit, right? It's fun to be able to say, yeah, I'm good at this, I'm good at that, right? And then when you're good at it, you want to do it more. And so once you can find those things, you'll find that the motivation is there.
So it's
I
funny.
love
I'm
it.
actually going to call myself out on it. So my son, my 9-year-old son, just finished the whole Harry Potter series, right? All 5 books, and these are, I mean, they're big books, right? This
Look,
isn't
yeah,
a,
yeah.
yeah. So when I was talking to my son about it, I was like, I think my son by the age of 10 will read more books than I've read in my entire life. And I put that in perspective. It's like, I can't let him do that. Like, he
Right.
can't beat me at 10 years old with the number of books he's read in his life versus mine. And so I'm calling myself out on that. That's something I need to change. I've
And
got my
reading's
few
great,
books.
right? But like my son is my 13-year-old, about to be 14, isn't a big reader. And my daughter, my 17-year-old, when she was 13, wasn't a big reader. And then this was the age where it kind of clicked for her. And so my son's coming around a little bit. But what I learned, and I had to change, was one day he comes to me, he goes, "Dad, why don't you like to do royalty deals on Shark Tank?" And he was about 10, your son's age. And I said, "Well, because it uses up gross margin dollars that you need for the product." And I'm like, "Do you know what gross margin dollars are?" He goes, "Yeah, I know what gross margin dollars." He's 10, by the way. He goes, I'm like, "What is it?" He goes, "Well, that's what you have left over after your cost of your product. Your revenue minus your cost of your product leaves your gross margin dollars." I'm like, "Where did you learn this?" He goes, "TikTok, YouTube. I've been watching videos in there." And I immediately went from, you have to read a lot of books, to, okay, whatever medium that you learn from, that's a good thing as long as you're learning.
Right.
I like that. Yeah, I wrote down 3 things there: learn, effort, and volunteering.
And agility, because you got to be able to adapt. Every entrepreneur, if you're not agile, you're going to get your ass kicked.
I've experienced that side of the fence.
I experience it almost every day right now. But all right, one more question, then we'll move on to wealth. But we have Michael Simpson. He says, "Love your energy, Mark. Love how bottom line you are on Shark Tank. How do you go about making difficult decisions? Do you have a specific process?"
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always try to put it, first question I ask is, what's the right thing to do? Right? Am I hurting anybody? Am I being nice to people, or is somebody going to get hurt? And because the first thing I want to do is avoid hurting people. Like my daughter one time, not long ago, my 20-year-old was like, business is about being mean. Business is about being able to step. I'm like, no, you don't step on people's necks. Nobody wants to do business with somebody like that, right? The biggest mistake I made when I was younger, just starting off in business, was I wasn't nice enough, right? I would yell, and I would scream sometimes. And I learned that was counterproductive, like we talked earlier. But when I'm making a hard decision, it's more, what do I think the right thing to do is, from a big picture thing, right? What's fair? Because fairness pays off in the long run. You don't have to win. A negotiation isn't about winning. I don't try to win negotiations. I try to get what I need, and I try to get something that platforms me for something else. Because it's rare in an entrepreneur's life that they only have one hard decision to make. And it's rare where you're dealing with people only one time. And, unless that company's going out of business, or that person leaves the industry, or whatever. But more often than not, you're going to want to develop relationships going forward. And I don't believe karma is real, but I believe in karma, if that makes sense, right? I want to do the right thing. I want to have good karma with the decisions I make. But sometimes there are just decisions where there's no good answers. Firing people is the absolute worst. It is the hardest thing ever to do, and I hate it. But sometimes you have to do it. Walking away from a customer, or in your case, banning somebody. You have to uphold your principles. But I have this thing, sorry about all these sayings, but I have this thing called checking your whole card. Like when you're playing cards, that you have a 2, 3, 5, 7, whatever, but you always look at your cards over and over and over again anyways, right? You don't just remember it. You're always checking your whole card. And we all have principles and things that we kind of live by and try to do, but I always want to reevaluate all those things, right? Because times change, just like reading, right? Well, my son taught me that learning from videos can be as good as reading. Even though I still want him to read, I had to adjust. And so when it comes to making hard decisions, you want to have good principles, but you also have to understand the context. You have to understand the big picture. You have to be able to balance the short term versus the long term. You have to look at how people are going to come out of it. And it's okay to give up something sometimes, right? It's okay if you make a little bit less money, but this person, that you are on the fence about firing or not, well, I'll keep them, right, and give them another chance, because the impact on their life is going to be so profound and so dramatic. I can make a few less dollars to deal with that, because people will see that. Now, some businessmen will say, well, they're going to see that you're soft. They're going to see that they can take advantage of you. But when someone tries to take advantage of you, you know it too. Then you have permission to fuck with them, right? Because somebody tried to take advantage. They weren't being fair. They weren't being nice. They weren't doing the right thing. They weren't being principled. And at that point in time, it's like, I have no sympathy for you. This is the right thing because you tried to take advantage. I had somebody that worked for me for a long time, and they had carte blanche, and they had the ability to give themselves raises, but I never thought they did to the extent that they did. Mm-hmm. And then when I was looking at a report, I was like, what the hell? You're paying yourself how much? And you're here this much? I trusted you. You're out. Mm-hmm. No ifs, ands, or buts. I don't have any sympathy for that. You took advantage. You're out. So context matters. Your principles matter. But just, when you're trying to do the right thing, you figure it out.
Love it. Well, we'll move to wealth next. Health is always a big part of everything, because mental health and physical health, right? I know we talked a lot about mental health, but right now, in my own life and in a lot of these guys' lives, right, they're in that crossroads. They're trying to up-level their lives, right? So that's why we started this, is to surround ourselves with people like you to kind of give us that fire under us and get input from someone who is where we want to be, right? My ambition is one day I want to be at your level, and I plan to be when I'm at that age of my life where I can.
You saying I'm old? You saying I'm old?
I'm saying I'm younger. But I know, Robert, you want to jump into the wealth side?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I know one of the questions that, Andrew, you were going to take. I'm going to start with that because actually, Mark, do you have a hard stop at 2?
Yeah, because I've got another appointment after this.
Okay. We're going to skip a few questions. I want to get the most impactful questions. And I know I'll just go ahead and start this one, Andrew. One of the big questions a lot of people have is, hey, look, if the worst happened, due to COVID, we lost our businesses, we lost our jobs, we lost Bitcoin, crushed us. My wife doesn't work. She's whatever, sickness, illness. If I had to start over with almost nothing, like, what would you tell someone today if they had nothing and they had to start somewhere? What direction, what guidance would you give them?
That's what I would do. Get a job. Mm-hmm. It's exactly what I would do. I would just go get a motherfucking job, and work at night. Like when I got to Dallas, I had nothing, and I was sleeping on the floor, 5 roommates, got a job bartending and bar backing at night. Hated it, right? But I had to pay the bills until I got going. And so, there's nothing, making a living, just having a job, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It may not be your final ambition, but there's nothing wrong with it being your starting point. And, you got to take care of your family. And, I'm not this, I don't believe in the whole, well, just go start that business. If you really bust your ass, you can be a millionaire in 12 months, right? Using other people's money and looking for shortcuts. And, hey, I'm going to, I saw this online and I'm going to trade futures or, all this other bullshit. You can't, there's no shortcuts, right? When I got fired from my job, when I was in Dallas, I started my company, but I started with the customer first, and I was willing to live like a student. I didn't have a family. I was sleeping on the floor, eating mustard and ketchup sandwiches, driving a car with a hole in the floorboard. I was that guy. I don't even know how many years it was before I bought a new suit. I would buy used clothes from the local rethreads place. And I would tell myself, okay, I want to save $100,000, because if I can save $100,000, I can live like a student until I'm ready to settle down and be poor but not be poor, right? because didn't need a lot. And so if you're willing to put yourself in a position where you can live cheap, you're not concerned about what other people think about you. And I was like, I don't give a fuck, right? This is not about them. This is about me. Then you can deal with it, and you have to start. And so getting the job first. And the second thing is to figure out what you're good at. Like for me, I'd get a job in sales because I know I'd bust my ass and outwork everybody, even if I lost it all tomorrow, and be the best salesperson in that organization, bar none. I don't care what I'd have to do. I'd be the best motherfucking sales rep ever in that company because I would bust my ass to do that. And if you can do that, once you get good and start working your way up the ladder because you're good at your job, things open up, And so you can't be resentful. Oh, my boss doesn't appreciate me or this or that. You have just got to be great at whatever it is that you think you can be great at and get that job in that area if you can. And I don't care if it's fast food. I don't care if it's selling door to door. I don't care if it's telemarketing. I don't care what it is, right? Find something that you can be good at and just start grinding. And then you start working your way up. But if you think there's going to be a shortcut and you try to find that shortcut, or you go online, oh, this guy on TikTok says I can buy and sell shoes and make $10,000 a month, you will lose your ass, guaranteed. And when you lie to yourself and think there's a shortcut, that's when you drag your family down with you.
Well said. Yeah. Well, Andrew, I don't want to ask too much more on the wealth questions. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd rather kind of dive into these relationship questions since a lot of our guys are obviously dads.
Yeah, I think we have some, we'll ask a couple of ours, but we have some guys that have some questions on that side too. So before I dive into mine, Danny Lee here says, amazing info, Mark. How do you balance giving your kids every opportunity and experience you can while keeping them grounded in the current environment where it seems like more is always better?
It scares the shit out of me, and I know my wife and I haven't done as good a job as we could because I see my daughter with all kinds of designer bags and this and that, despite us trying, I'm like, because my wife isn't real fancy, either. We'll buy as many clothes at Target as we do anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I literally buy 90% of my clothes on Amazon. No lie. I mean, and so trying to convey that to my kids, I don't want to call them out, but yeah, it's hard and it's a challenge and it's scary. But we're working on it, and we didn't do a good enough job on teaching them how to do budgets and the like, and we're working on that now.
Mm-hmm. I still need to learn that. And I'm in my mid-30s. So, well, Robert, I'll let you dive in next, and then we'll dive in for a couple more questions so these guys can ask their questions too.
Yeah, sure. I had a question on, when you grew up, what did you take away from your experience being a child with the parents you had? What did you take from them and instill in your kids, or you liked, and then vice versa? What did you experience that you didn't like and you adjusted and changed now that we're in a different environment?
I mean, my dad did upholstery on cars. My mom did odd jobs. Neither one went to college. My dad used to take me to his work, and I would make $5 sweeping the floor. And it wasn't because he wanted me to make $5. It was because he wanted to see how hard everybody worked. And none of them went to college, right? And it was like, look, you're going to college because I don't want you to have the same type of job that I do. And I want you to accomplish things that I can't even dream of. And as I started to go forward, and I remember the first time I made $100,000 in a year, and I told my dad, who never made more than $40,000 a year in his life, he just started bawling, right? And so with my kids now, I just try to convey to them that, like what we talked about, no different. You have to be self-aware. You have to learn. You have to set, you have to challenge yourself. You have to, find something you like to do. But as kids, you don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up yet. You just have to be excited to learn. And when you find something you really like to do, just work really hard to be great at it. And so, they're getting to that point now where, like, my one daughter's in college, and she's starting to figure out more things. My middle daughter is great at rowing, and she's getting recruited, and she's trying to decide what she wants to do. But they all, you guys have got 19 kids between you. You know that they all have you know that they all have different personalities,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and you think they're going to be like you, but one's like your wife and one's completely different, right? Just like my two brothers and I, the three of us, we're all completely different. And so, you know, I just want to let them be themselves, but be self-aware enough that they've got to put in the effort. You know, they've got to find something they love to do and really value learning and enjoy to learn.
So there's a couple of questions that actually relate to that. So I'm going to jump into those. Where to go? Here it is. With everything going on in the world, how are you preparing your kids for the dystopian future?
Yeah, you can't, right? You know, I try to just again learn so you know what's coming and you can anticipate. And stand up for yourselves because like my generation, the baby boomers, we're fucking morons. We went from sex, drugs, and rock and roll to watching Fox News and thinking climate change is not real, you know? And talking to my peers that are like that, I'm like, look, dude, you have one, my kids are younger than theirs. You have grandkids now. You want to bet the whole farm and, you know, bet everything that the world will be just fine for them? Or do you just want to like hedge your risk a little bit and try to do things that, you know, minimize the impact on the climate or our world? So, you know, that all said, well, I think the boomers and to a certain extent, Gen X have kind of screwed things up. I think Gen Z and younger have from what I've seen with my kids and their friends, give us a bright future, right? Because they understand, they have access to so much information that they can learn things so much more quickly than we could. Maybe we got a magazine, maybe we turned on the TV or radio, maybe we read a book, but we had to go get those things. Now everything's on your phone, on your fingertips, and I think they'll be able to, as our generations die out, they'll be there to lead the way and not just accept, okay, you know, it's going to be a dystopian future. I think they really can get our act together.
Well, that's refreshing to hear for sure. How do you manage? I love the technology. I mean, AI is fantastic. It's got a phenomenal arena for us to use and benefit from. But what I notice, even my kids, and especially parents who aren't as involved, their kids are always on the social media, always on their cell phones, right? The engagement level of face-to-face communication is lacking a lot of times.
I mean, you got to schedule things, right? You got to put together the time and get them places and do things, you know, like my kids will go out and do things, but when they're home, they're on their phone, right? And that doesn't scare me as much because I remember sitting in front of the TV for hours at a time, right? Or sitting in my room listening to the radio or music or a sporting event for hours at a time. It's just different technology. It's not really different. Kids are going to want to get away from their parents and tune out their parents no matter what, right? Just like we did with our parents. And, you know, they would be like, turn off the TV. You're sitting too close. You're going to go blind. Or, you know, did I find a Playboy under your bed? Where the hell did you get that? You know, that's just the nature of kids and families. That said, here's the hack for parents. You know, one thing that has been important to us, now I'm not on my oldest, but, you know, we have access to their phones and their social media. And if you go look at your kid's TikTok, you'll know everything you need to know about your child because those algorithms feed them everything that they like. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I'll look at my sons and I'm going to see, you know, sports highlight after sports highlight, fantasy football, couple cute girls, fantasy football, right? And my 17-year-old, it's going to be rowing and music and fashion. And so it really says a lot. And it's, you know, because with our parents, with us, whether you're 30 or 60, you know, they really didn't have any insights. Mm-hmm. You know, it was just, okay, so what do you like? Or, you know, they had to actually talk to us and talking to your parents then like now isn't what kids love to do all that much. You know, my kids, like your kids, how was school? Fine. What'd you do? It was school, right? You learn anything new? Nah, right? How's your friends? What about this? Yeah, it's all right. I mean, if you get 3 sentences out of them, that's a good day. And so you just got to, you can't try to force what you think worked for you as a child on or in your family will work for them now because the technology has changed. But you've got to recognize, like, I remember my dad saying, turn that music off or turn the TV off, right? And, that's just every generation is a little bit different, but it's always the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good perspective. I appreciate that.
So I'll ask one more question before we let you go for the day. And that question is on the saying, birds of a feather flock together, right? So we believe, Lone Star Dads is the largest mastermind or largest community of dads in the state of Texas, right? And then Alpha Dad is a little different. It's more about those really trying to do that next thing, take that next step and make their life better, right? Not just go into a group and bitch and complain about their wife or their kids, but actually moving forward in our life. So have you ever been part of masterminds or groups? Is that something you're still part of, or have you outgrown those? Is that something that
No,
you still
I
do?
never was a joiner or a group type guy.
Right.
I have my friends that have always been my friends, and I can bitch and moan to them if I need to, or they can get me fired up. Like, the Pittsburgh guys that I grew up with when I was in junior high, elementary school, junior high, and high school, we do a Zoom every couple of weeks. And so, last night I was on a Zoom with them. And so, we all talked shit to each other like we were still 16 years old. But, I was never big into groups, but I was always on a mission. And, but networking and learning is always a positive, right? Being able to share experiences, however you do them, is always a positive, as long as you're adapting and learning and trying to move forward. The hard part, like you found with that other dude, right, is who you associate really defines a lot of how you approach things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just getting into a group that's positive, like you guys are, that's supportive, like you guys are, means a lot because, like your point earlier, I'm so used to having people everywhere around me. Like, I just try to get as much privacy as I can. I don't have a lot of help. You see, if you look behind me, my office is a mess and there's nobody here cleaning things up. There's nobody here making my meals for me. Well, sometimes they do, but, I just had for lunch real quick. My wife had made mashed potatoes last night and there were leftover mashed potatoes. That was my lunch, leftover mashed potatoes. And so, you have to figure out your circumstances, and when things are stressful and tough on you, having a group with what you guys are doing, I think is a real positive.
Well, thank you. Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for jumping on, answering our questions and the guys' questions. We know how valuable your time is, and it really means the world to us that we were able to get an hour of your day from you.
Well, I enjoyed it, guys. You guys did a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. And all the dads out there, let me just tell you a quick, dad, from my perspective. Like, I have my two older daughters. If I get them to say 20 words to me a week, that's a good week, right? My son and I, we can tell poop jokes and talk sports all day long. My wife and my daughters, it's easier for them to communicate. So those moments that, you're not communicating as much as you would like, we all go through it. It is just reality. Now, some dads would, have that relationship with, they can talk all day, and I'm jealous, right? But just know that no matter who you are, no matter where you are, family dynamics are family dynamics, and there's no one right way or wrong way. You just got to make the best of it.
Agreed.
Thank you,
Well, Mark,
Mark.
thank you so much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
You got it, guys. Appreciate
Go
it.
Mavs.
Yes, sir. Take care, guys.
All right. Thank you.